Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In an effort to honor your time, we're going to go ahead and get started to make sure we can get through everything. For those of you that haven't met me, my name is Jessica Hammock, and I'm the Director of Behavioral and Mental Health for Responsive Ed. Thank you to all my fan club out here that has shown up today. So, no pressure or anything. And thank you to those of you that are joining us virtually. I know sometimes it's hard to watch virtually and not feel the energy, but hopefully you'll find something that you can take away today. So, I do want to get started and kind of talk about emotional wellness and the idea really of what now and how things might look different coming back. And I know some of you have heard many of my talks, so here's the thing, if you've heard me before, you know, science says that you have to hear something 6 times in its entirety before you retain 25% of it. So the good news is you probably didn't catch it before, maybe you'll catch it today. So with that, I would like to get started and know a little bit about you as an audience. And if you're watching virtually, of course, I'd love for you to stand, even though I can't see you. It's still important to participate. So how many of you, this is your first year teaching? Will you stand up for the audience? Any first year people? All right, give them a round of applause. Being very brave. Okay, how many of you have been teaching between 1 and 3 years? You've already taught 1 year, 1 to 3 years. All right, awesome. So they taught during some of the hardest stuff. All right, let's see, 3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 or 4, you know, in there, okay? All right, we're gonna make it a little bit bigger. If you have taught 6 to 10 years. Anybody here for 6 to 10 years? All right. And then how many of you have committed your life to this and you've been doing it more than 11 years? Are anybody in here has done it more? All right, real heroes in the crowd. All right, well, thank you. For those of you that don't know me, I did start out as a teacher with Responsive Ed. Actually, I taught before I got to Responsive Ed, but I started out here as a 5th grade teacher for all subjects and then did math and science for quite a few years until I begged them to give me another job, and they finally got tired of me begging, so they said, okay, we'll give you another job. Please stop and leave us alone. And then they're like, well, we really don't know if your job is valid, if we actually need you. And then I did a year of it, and they're like, what were we thinking? We need way more of you. But now we have to find the money to do that. So here I am, and I'm so grateful to be in front of you today. But what I would like to talk to you about is going back to the basics. To be honest with you, we spend a lot of time talking about Bloom's taxonomy. We talk about Piaget's stages of learning. But the truth is we need to talk about the basic needs first. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is one of them. I love this graphic by William Glasser. And the truth is, all behavior is communication. So thinking about your relationship with yourself, thinking about your relationship with your spouse, your loved ones, your children, your moms and dads, your guardians, your aunts and uncles, your cousins, and your students, your peer colleagues, your administration. Whenever they show you a behavior, it's just communication. And typically, if you can remember at the basis of everything that we're doing, an individual is just communicating to you, and most often it's from the place that one of these needs or more has been jeopardized or challenged, okay? So thinking about the 5 basic needs, and I will share this presentation with the administration. They can give you a copy of it. You can look up and find this particular graphic. But I would challenge you, if you do nothing else from my presentation today, print this graphic out and put it beside your desk as like the note you look at every single day, as a reminder to you that most, if not all, kids are communicating to you from a place of my needs are not being met. And we're going to talk about some other factors as part of that, but this is really the foundation. And if you can remember that one of these was jeopardized, it's going to show up as behavior in your classroom. Anxiety, anger, frustration, shame, guilt, and a whole manner of other fun things, okay? But it starts with the foundation that these needs are not being met or they're being threatened. So just a quick poll for you. This was impacted significantly by COVID. So I want to know for you, if you think about the 5 main categories, love and belonging, power, fun, survival, and freedom, which of those were impacted most for you, okay? So if you felt like love and belonging was most impacted for you during the time period that we were locked down for the initial lockdown for COVID, I want you to stand up. Anybody for love and belonging? Okay, what about power? Anybody for power? Okay. What about fun? Anybody that felt like their fun was most impacted? Okay. What about survival? Any survival? And then last but not least, freedom. I should see the rest of you standing, by the way. Some of you have not stood up at all. I have watched a classroom like this before, I know. Keeping my eye out. The truth is that everybody was impacted differently because of different stages of our life, different relationships, and a lot of different factors. What was most impacted for our students was love and belonging. And some fun, but often love and belonging. And what they also found was that technology was not nearly as connecting as they once thought it to be. Like, we all knew that, right? But the thing is the kids finally stumbled across that. Why? Why is that? Because the truth is that, trying not to be all woo-woo, but really scientifically speaking, we have energy that's part of our body. It's part of how we interact with other people. You can feel someone's energy field up to 5 feet away. So even if you're not communicating with them, you can feel the energy state that they are in. If they're sad, if they're depressed, if they're angry, if they're upset, if they're at peace, if they're happy, you can physically feel that. So yes, all the kids can sit around in a room, all being on their phones, texting and talking to other people not in the room, and still feel what we call a felt sense of safety, because they are feeling the people that they are connected to. And once COVID hit and took that away from them, being on technology really no longer mattered because they didn't feel that way anymore. In addition to that, there's also something that they've since labeled as Zoom fatigue, because it requires so much more brain energy to actually read the facial expressions of someone else and then interpret them. So it wasn't just about listening to the content that you were teaching, it was also about reading your facial expressions, reading your body language on camera, interpreting the mood that you're in, trying to find all their friends in the meeting as well, understand where they're at and what's going with them. So most of their attention and energy was directed to that, and the content wasn't caught. So again, love and belonging was something that was a big challenge for most of our students. And how did it show up? Anxiety, anger, frustration, extreme outbursts. The kids that were normally connected to each other and normally interactive with each other all of a sudden shut down and didn't know how to communicate. And the thing is, while many of the students might have populated the school campuses that you work at, there were quite a few of our school campuses that a significant portion still visited online, still attended online. So how many of you taught or teach or have taught kindergarten? Will you raise your hand for me? Okay, so a few of you in here. And how many of you fondly remember how awesome it is to work with the kindergartners after you come back from holiday break? Because you get to reteach them how to walk in a straight line, how not to talk in the hallways, how to sit with their fun friends, right? Okay, it's going to be like that this year. Just plan on it. Even if you don't teach kindergarten, you're going to have to remember that they have to relearn skills on how to be with people, how to communicate as friendships, even if they're seniors. Because most of them have lost that ability. It wasn't at the forefront because other things took over. So I want to talk to you about the idea of where we all start from. There's what we call having a secure or unsecure base. And yes, this does play a big role. Now, many of the population that you work with may have a very secure base where they are self-reliant and they're able to be empathetic and they're able to understand empathy in other people. The need for attachment for an individual never lessens. So you even have a need for attachment. And based on how your life was in your formative years is how you approach attachment now. There's different styles of it. There's disorganized, there's ambivalent, there's avoidant, and it's behaviors that show up in you now as adults. So that's why it's fun to always interact with different kinds of colleagues. But one thing I want to point out is that going back to the 5 basic needs, children will go to almost any length to be seen and heard. So think about that. Think about the kids, the students, the scholars that you have taught in your past. We're not looking at behaviors that are in character. We're looking at the behaviors from a perspective of they're going to do what it takes to get that need communicated to you, to be seen by you, and to be heard by you. And so I'm sure probably none of you have ever heard this, but I have sat in a few conversations with parents where they're like, that's not my child, they don't act like that. I'm sure none of you have ever heard that, but I have. And the truth is it is their child because their child is trying to communicate differently with you. See, they figured out what works to communicate at home. Now they're trying different things with you because they haven't had you as long in front of them, so they're going to try different things. They want to be seen and they want to be heard. And we also have something, abused children are triggered much differently than those that haven't experienced abuse. And so simple things, how many of you have please don't do it right now, it's okay, I got it, I know what it might look like. But how many of you silently would raise your hand to say that you have the teacher look down? Like the look that you give them across the room so that they fall into line. It's very similar to the mom look or the dad look or whatever, It's that get yourself together and start behaving so we can move on with today. The truth is that look can really actually be very triggering, especially for abused children. And my next favorite thing that leads me to is mirror neurons, because actually what happens is people that are in front of us are going to mirror what we show them. I had this great professor in college, and he was our music director. He was very passionate when he directed the music. He used lots of hand motions, was very big and loud, and he really was very good at his job. But he just had one problem. And at the end of every performance, he would always say to us, "You didn't smile. Why didn't you smile? You need to smile. Act like you're having fun and enjoy yourselves." And we're like, okay, but the face that you're showing us is so intense and passionate, it's painful. Okay, the thing is we as a choir, we're mirroring what he showed us, okay? Your students will mirror you, which brings me to one of my favorite sayings, a well-regulated adult produces a well-regulated child. The truth is, if it becomes about you and your ego, or your pride, or whatever you want to call that thing, your teacher look or whatever, they must follow the rules, they must fall in line, they must obey. Yes, all of those are important. But how you communicate that in relationship to students, they will show it back to you. So just think about the fact that maybe, just maybe, if you have a class full of grumpy students, maybe you're grumpy. Maybe they're just showing you what you're showing them. It's just how we live life. We have trained our brains to do that thing. For instance, if you're ever sitting in a room of people, I love observing people, by the way. If you're ever sitting in a room of people and you see one person reach for their drink and they take a drink and they put it down, it's amazing to watch the cascade of people that all of a sudden reach for their drink. Because even out of the peripheral vision, our brains have been triggered. Oh yeah, maybe I should take a drink. That's just mirror neurons and how it works. I also want to talk about regulation because this plays a really big key. See, when babies are born, what they start with is external regulation. External regulation is all about the adult caregiver learning to read their signals and meet their needs. The adult caregiver will try to feed them, change their diaper, make sure they're not hot or cold, make sure they feel good, soothe them, all the things. The adult caregiver reads the signals. Then we move to a co-regulative state that typically occurs during toddlerhood. This co-regulative state is where the child begins to communicate what their needs might be in very simplistic terms. Cup, up, hold, toy, blankie, those kind of things. They still aren't able at a space to meet their own needs, but they are able to start the communication process with them, okay? And then we move into what we call self-regulation. The self-regulation is more the students that you serve. They're able to communicate their needs to you. I need a snack. Now, the parent still may play a role, the guardian, the teacher, whatever. Okay, you need a snack. Go to the pantry. There's juice, there's fruit cups there, or there's chips, or whatever. I need to know where my yellow folder is. Okay, well, the yellow folders are all stacked in the corner in this third bin, or whatever. You're able to give instructions. You're able to provide support. but the truth is they're doing the communication of the needs for the majority of the time. Here's the kicker. If there's been any abuse or trauma that's occurred to an individual, they usually stop regulation at that stage. So, what does that mean? Some of you may have high school students that have trouble asking for help. Why? Because they're stuck in a co-regulation stage. They have very simplistic ways of communicating that they're stuck and they need help. There might be a lot of shame and guilt also attached to the fact that they don't really want to or know how to appropriately ask for help. And most of the help needed is interpreted by the adult. So I just want you to think about your students this year and the students you've worked with and really connect with maybe they're stuck at a stage where they're having trouble articulating what it is that they actually need. Okay? Going back to those behaviors, that behavior is communicating to you, there is a need, they're having trouble articulating what it could be. That being said, this is my favorite part. I love the nervous system. I study a lot about trauma. I'm very passionate about how trauma impacts the brain and the body, how trauma impacts how we communicate with each other, and how trauma impacts relationships. So I want to talk to you about this great thing called the autonomic nervous system. For all of my science teachers in here, just go ahead and check out. I'm going to be layman's terms, so don't hold me to anything. I'm not getting into a debate with you. We can visit later offline. Anyways, on the left side, the blue side right here, we have the parasympathetic system. That's actually how we're wired to interact with people. That's how, by nature, that's our default setting, parasympathetic. When we're in parasympathetic system, we have pupils that are constricted, we have relaxed breathing, we have relaxed digestion, everything's flowing as though it should be. With that comes the emotions of joy, peace, satiety. That's how we're wired to be in a relaxed state. What happens, though, when we experience a trauma or a threat in our brains of any kind, we default to sympathetic functioning. One of the fastest ways to tell if somebody's in sympathetic functioning is to see if their pupils are dilated. That's the fastest external signal you can see. In addition to that, their heart rate will speed up, their breathing will quicken, they may appear shaky, and I'll talk more about the shakiness in just a second. They may appear shaking in their hands or their feet. Actually, also what happens is their digestion system goes to sleep, and so does the reproductive system. That's why they talk about people who experience situations related to fertility or reproductive issues or concerns could be because of prolonged stress or something that is constantly triggering them to put that system into sleep mode. This is also why you might hear students complain of stomach aches. My stomach hurts, what's wrong? I don't know. Their sympathetic system has been activated. Their stomach is not digesting the food that they just had. That great breakfast burrito that they came into school eating is just sitting there churning. Yes, their stomach hurts. Also, what you'll see is headaches because of the constant release of cortisol that happens in the body because the sympathetic system is activated. So I want to talk to you about a little friend of mine. And pardon me, because I'm gonna get my phone out because I'm gonna play a sound. That's why I'm not up here connecting with all my friends. But I want to talk to you about somebody who lives in my head. Now you have one too. It's okay. Okay, you might call yours something different. But this is Detective Danger. Detective Danger lives in my head, and I will tell you, as much as I love him and as much as he's there for my comfort and safety, he's quite jumpy. Okay. He has a little bit of a problem. We've been trying to work on it. It's a slow process. But anyways, I digress. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. The thing is this is kind of how Detective Danger usually works. He's always on the lookout to keep me safe. He's always on the lookout to make sure I live through each day, right? It's a big job. You got to be on your game all the time. So the truth is like I'm walking through the woods, right? And just out for a leisurely stroll. There's a nice breeze blowing. I'm just like humming to myself, thinking how grand the world is. And all of a sudden, truly out of nowhere, fully unexpected, Detective Danger hears this amazing sound. Okay, now Detective Danger, he freaks out. He hits something called the panic button in my brain. The panic button turns on Fear Fawcett, and what Fear Fawcett does is sends cortisol rushing through my body to my arms and legs, and he is up there frantically Googling my brain's database to decide what are we gonna do to save ourselves, because there is a bear and we might die today. And then I have failed. So he's like up there frantically looking at what's happening. That cortisol or adrenaline is flooding to my arms and legs. My heart is beating fast. My breath is quickening. And the reproductive organs and the stomach organs and everything I talked to you about, all the digestion, that's all gone to sleep because I no longer need it. I need to live. And my saying is I don't run, so if you see me running, you should run too because it means a bear's chasing me. So I take off running, and all the people are like, why is she running? And I'm like, there's a bear! Okay, because he's decided, Detective Danger's decided that's the way we're going to live today is to run, okay? I finally make it out of the woods, jump in my car, slam the door shut, lock it, and breathe. Y'all need to take a breath too, because some of y'all were running with me. He, at that point, realizes, okay, she's safe. She's gonna live through the day. Yes, I survived, I did my job, we're all good. So he turns off the panic button and it turns off that faucet. And the truth is within 24 to 48 hours, my body has fully rid itself of the cortisol that's been coursing through it. But the truth is, that was one instance, one situation, and one bear. Some of us have bears that show up every single day. We call it perceived threat. And anytime our system experiences a perceived threat, that whole pattern I just talked about activates itself. Some of you, your faucet won't turn off. It's on constant drip. Your system is constantly activated and you're constantly feeling threatened. So your colleague walks down the hall and they give you a funky look and you're like, what did I do wrong? They must hate me. I must have said something. What did I say? I thought I was doing fine. Everything was great. And what am I going to do? Now I need to quit my job. Now I need to go apply. I don't have time for this. I need a nap. I need a drink. I need all these things. And really, they just really had a bad burrito and their stomach is churning. It had nothing to do with you. But their look activated your system. Same thing happens with students quite frequently. The thing is they're always in that system. When that system is activated from our amygdala, we have something in our brain called the anterior cingulate cortex. It activates it, it runs through the amygdala, and it's this whole cycle that it goes through. But one of the big things that it bypasses every single time is this fun part of our brain up here called the prefrontal cortex. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's our logic and reasoning center. Now, here's the thing. It's not fully developed till you're 25, which is why they charge men more for car insurance until they're 25, because they want to make sure the logic is all the way kicked in, okay? But the truth is any time your brain perceives that a bear is chasing it, whether it's a real bear or not, that prefrontal cortex is turned off. So if you've ever engaged in a discussion with a student as to why they did that, why did you do that? What were you thinking? I don't know. That's a truthful response because they're not able to connect with the logic and reasoning center of their brain, and they will not connect with it until their system has come to a full and complete relaxed state, until they return to parasympathetic. And some of your students that are in a constant state of trauma or abuse, it will be really hard to connect with that. Processing information, such as math, ELAR, writing, history, all of those things is going to take quite a bit more effort on their part because that prefrontal cortex is not engaged. So, just briefly to talk about trauma, when trauma happens, our system can get stuck in on position, When it floods way too much of that cortisol through our system is completely stuck in what we call off position. It's an actual state they call dorsal vagal state. It's the highly depressed state. When it's stuck in on position, it's the anxiety state. You see constant shaking in an individual. And while they may be sitting in a building just like this, perfectly physically safe, their body has told them, or their brain has told them that they're not safe. And that's how it's expressing themselves in their body, a constant shaking. It's not because they're cold. Their system is on overload. Once they have a flood of that their body just cannot use up, they can hit a depressive state. Doesn't mean they can't come out of it, it's just their system got turned off. And it's so full of cortisol and stress, they have to have intentional work to relax their body, because until they relax their body, none of that will leave. So, complex trauma just is multiple things that could occur. It could be chronic over a long period of time, but it also, I want to say to you that it's developed mostly from an interpersonal relationship, which also means the best part for you is that it can be healed through relationship. So let me say that again for you. Trauma can be healed through relationship. And that's where you all play such a big key, because all of what you're doing is relational with students. Yes, I know they're paying you for math or history or reading or Latin or whatever. That's what they're paying you for. But the truth is, what you're doing is being relational. And if you yourself are not at a regulated state, if you yourself have not convinced yourself internally that there are no bears chasing you today, your ability to establish relationship, to build relationship, and foster growth will be significantly hindered. So you need to start checking your bears at the door, okay? So these are a lot of different things that they look at when they talk about trauma. I apologize for looking because I have this split screen thing, so while I know the presentation, it's kind of like I'm looking at something random on my computer, not trying to be disrespectful. But big T trauma are things that people would normally call trauma events, things like war, things like car accidents, things like serious injury, big events. But then there's little t trauma, and it doesn't mean that it's just little traumas. It means that it's more subtle forms of things. For instance, I have a really mean teacher. Kids are impacted for this. I'm sure, but I'm not going to ask you to show, that some of you experienced some, maybe potentially struggles in your educational years because of a teacher who wasn't so pleasant. That stores on the brain. Bullying stores on the brain as a trauma. And I understand that there's a vast amount of definitions for bullying, but most of it goes back to their perception. How we perceive things is actually how it stores as a trauma for us. In most of the trauma studies that they've done, so here's the thing, I'll back up, and this is very unconventional. You will not hear this in most therapy realms, but as I've pursued studying trauma to the depths, there is no such thing as trauma as a disorder. Trauma is an injury to your system. The reason they call it a disorder, and they started with that, is so they could get money to fund the research. Before they had PTSD, it was called hysteria. We've always had trauma show up in people. They just needed a diagnosis with some descriptors to have money to study how to help them best. The point is, it's an injury to the nervous system and to the brain, okay? Which is why it can be healed through relationships. But these things impact, in studying all the trauma, there was no one type of event that was significantly labeled as a trauma. Sexual molestation, rape, war, car accident, all the things, the worst things in the world you can think about, none of them will be labeled as a trauma. Because in the survey of the hundreds and hundreds of people that they did, everybody had a different reaction to what they experienced. And so even up to every event that they surveyed, less than 50% of all of them were labeled as traumatic for an individual. So they said the scale is not great enough for us to say this event is traumatic. It's how you as an individual and your nervous system goes through an event. What also is going to be up here in the future? COVID-19 is a trauma. Some people are still significantly experiencing it as a traumatic situation. It is a chronic situation that continues to impact our students, maybe ourselves. And how does it impact? Going back to where we first started. Those 5 key areas, behavior is communication, okay? So I'm sure that some of you have heard me talk before about adverse childhood experiences. Is there anyone in the room that has not heard of the ACEs study or adverse childhood experiences? Okay, so for those of you that haven't heard it, Kaiser Permanente partnered with the CDC in the late 1990s to do a study on the health impacts on adults in their company. Adults who face significant risk or significant experience of heart disease, cancer, all types of mental health issues, and a vast other number of physical problems. And what they found when they traced it back was a set of descriptors that significantly impacted those individuals. And so they labeled it the adverse childhood experiences. And they categorized the adverse childhood experiences by physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical neglect, emotional neglect, and then a whole set of other descriptors: the mother treated violently, incarcerated relative, mental illness in the home, substance abuse, divorce, bullying, and cyberbullying has since been added to that list. And so an individual that experiences one of these events, their brain automatically starts processing life as a trauma. Individuals who experienced 4 or more of these prior to the age of 18, their system was 4 times more likely to experience a significant health problem later in life. Heart disease, cancer, stroke, mental illness, all sorts of things. Also, they studied the brain impact. So individuals that experienced 4 or more of these had brain scans that showed that the child had brain sizes up to 1.5 times smaller than individuals who hadn't experienced them or had only experienced 1. So, thinking about that, the question is, for your students, not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. Because if we can begin to understand the story of our students and where they come from, and we can't just be assumptive that because we come from a 2-parent home that everything is fine and dandy. I've sat and talked with some of the students at your campuses, and they learn to conceal really well, but the truth is some of them have stories that are heart-wrenching, and that will impact the behavior that they're communicating to you with, because there is always a bear there in their heads, always a bear. So I just want you to be aware that these things impact the brain, they impact the behavior, they impact the system and how they show up, and this is also based on perception. Some people say emotional neglect. What is that? Lack of felt support. If as a child, and some of you, many of you have sat through my presentation on the GEMS, and we've talked about the different personality styles. If I have parents that are a different personality than the child, they may say, I love you all day long, but the child isn't able to receive it. And when the child isn't able to receive love and support, it will store on their brain as emotional neglect. My parents don't love me. Or what I see a lot, especially at campuses that you all work with, is my parents' love is tied to my performance. My parents won't love me unless I get an A. Or, I failed this test. My parents don't love me anymore. Automatically, you will see a trauma response in those students. So, how does the trauma show up? Well, it can show up in their brain. We talked about the brain size, the biology, the system, and how the system is overloaded. It will show up in the behavior they communicate to you. It will show up in their body functions, headaches, stomach aches, not able to function. Some are overtired all the time. It's not because they're not sleeping at night. Their system is just overrun with cortisol. And it also shows up so much of what I deal with in their belief systems about themselves. I'm stupid. I'm dumb. I can't do this. I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, and on and on and on. They believe this because they haven't learned to recognize that their system is overloaded and the bear is roaring very loudly all the time. So because the bear is roaring loudly, your voice becomes like the Charlie Brown teacher. Wah, 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 wah. And they're working super hard in their brain to try to separate what the truth is that you're saying to them and drown out the bear. And most of them don't have great techniques to drown out the bear. Here's a whole long list of how it shows up. You can zoom in and take a screenshot. I'll send the presentation out. But the truth is it shows up in executive functioning, how they organize their binder or their papers or their notes and turning things in on time, how they show up to your classroom. Do they have all the supplies? Are they ready to learn? It's not just about you enforcing a set of rules. It's about you understanding what happened to them. Do they actually even have the capacity to do that? I'm running from the bear. I don't care if I have a pencil to class today. I'm trying to save my life internally. The pencil is irrelevant. And you're like, can't you just bring a pencil to class? Like, please, just bring a pencil. That would be helpful. So again, it goes back to that relationship piece, you understanding a little bit about them and their story. And I understand there are those individuals that will never have a pencil, that aren't being chased by a bear, they just don't find it relevant to bring to class. Okay, so I understand that too. Their worldview, their sense of self, their relationships. The relationships are significantly impacted, especially if moving is another trauma, especially in the younger grades. Everybody says kids are resilient. Actually they're not. They're really not. We teach them how to be resilient. And the truth is moving is highly traumatic to every student that I've worked with that said they moved in the younger grades. It's stored as a trauma. They have unresolved grief about it. They had to completely change their identity to fit in. And the parents are like, everything's good. They made new friends. But when you talk to them and you listen to their story, it's different than it was before. Internally, something shifted in them. So, there are some pillars of trauma-informed care. I'm not going to take time to play the video today. I have put a slide at the end that has YouTube clips of all the videos, and you all can watch them on your leisure time that I know you have so much of because you're amazing teachers and you have your whole year planned and you're great and ready to go. But what do we do? How do we care for them? Is safety, giving nurturing care, helping them to be part of themselves. And I must have like several of these because there's a slide that I completely skipped, but I will tell you most about it, and that is anxiety showing up. Anxiety is going to be something that we are all naturally wired to have. And because we are all naturally wired to have some anxiety, some forms of it are good. There are some times that we experience it to activate our system to movement and expression, and there's going to be other times where we're overloaded and our system is in distress because of it. And more students are going to show up to your class with anxiety. That is just their sympathetic system has been activated all the time, and it's really communicating with them and connecting with them and talking to them about the fact that they can be active in their healing. And we're going to talk about the practical side of what that looks like. So helping them regulate. And I'm like, I know that in your mind, you're like, I don't have time for this, and this is not what they hired me for. But the truth is, it doesn't matter how amazing you are at teaching math and science. And I know that there are amazing teachers sitting in this crowd. I have worked with some of them. I have watched them. I have participated in life with them. And I know that they're amazing. But the truth is, it doesn't matter how amazing you are if you're not relational with your student and you can't recognize that it's through that relationship that they need support. Because until you recognize that and help them understand regulation, even through simple things, you will not be effective at math or science or history or anything else that you're put in place to do. Because first and foremost, they have to feel safe. They have to know what that looks like. They have to learn how to communicate that. That's why being an autonomous self is really important, to be able to say yes and no to things. Students in the elementary grades really struggle sometimes with this when there's trauma or threat present. They don't know how to say, no, I don't want to do that, I'd rather do this instead, because they believe their identity and their peace of going through the day is tied fully to them being able to be loved and accepted by other people. So that means saying yes to everything. Teenagers, what that looks like is them experimenting with a million things that are totally out of their character or their norm to find what it's like for somebody to say, yes, that's acceptable behavior. Yes, that's an acceptable way to dress. Yes, those are acceptable shoes. Yes, that's an acceptable cell phone. Or that's an acceptable picture you put on your social media. Or that's an acceptable movie to like. Okay? So, providing a safe space is really important. Again, it's not about what's wrong with you, but what happened to you, to be able to communicate that to them. And then helping them maybe recognize emotions. A lot of individuals don't know how to recognize their own emotions that they're feeling. If you don't know how to do that, that's okay. There's a great little tool out there that if you need a visual is called the mood meter, M-O-O-D meter. And the mood meter is divided into 4 quadrants. It has higher energy emotions from an uncomfortable side and a comfortable side. So uncomfortable will be anger, frustration, rage, things like that. Comfortable will be happy, ecstatic, joyful. That is high energy emotions. And those are can be where our sympathetic system is overstimulated. And then there's low energy emotions. Low energy can also be comfortable and uncomfortable. Uncomfortable is sad, depressed, lonely. And then comfortable emotions would be calm, relaxed, peaceful. So there's a great tool out there. It has words in it. There's an elementary one and a high school one. You can look it up. But that is part of how you help them use the correct words. It's part of the latest buzz for social emotional intelligence. You spend a lot of time teaching vocabulary to individuals that's important to the content you're teaching. But we are engaging in a time of learning with students where they do not have the skills or the vocabulary to communicate how they need to ask for help when it comes to their emotions and what's going on with them. I'm okay, I'm fine, everything's fine is not communicating what they need, okay? So, what's the answer? Well, relaxing our body is the start of all of this. Because if we cannot relax our body and tell ourselves that the bear is not there, that we're safe from the bear today, the rest is irrelevant. So these are just some practical things. We get to practice, okay? It'll be okay, I'll do them with you, and we'll all look silly together, but then you can say, yes, I have some tools, because I can talk to you all day long, and remember, you may only retain 25% of it, but if you practice some things, maybe you'll remember them, and you can use them. Because the truth is if you can be present in your classroom with relationships, even to do these things periodically, these are relationship builders. These are saying, I'm a safe person, you can come to me and we can figure out what help looks like. Okay, so the first thing is a pinky check-in. Pinky check-in is super easy. It's especially valuable for middle school and high school students who don't want to spill their guts to you. Okay, so pinky check-in is if your pinky is up, that's like 100%. I'm here today, I'm fully checked in, engaged, ready to go. Pinky is sort of like halfway, like, yeah, I'm sort of here, I'm not really here, it's kind of so-so. And then pinky's down means like, I'm really having a hard time, I'm barely here, I'm physically present, but emotionally or whatever, something else is going on. And you won't offend me if we do this and your pinky's down, you won't offend me. So, for you in the audience that are participating, tell me where you're at in your pinky check-in. If I'm going to ask for you to do a pinky check-in, where are you at? Let me see some pinkies in the audience. I've got about like 60% participation here. Awesome. Okay, thank you for checking in. So something simple you can do, you can notice if people aren't checking in, why are they not checking in, what's going on with them? I won't call anybody out today, I don't have time for that. Okay, so the next thing is calm breathing. And there's 2 types of people with calm breathing. The first type we're going to address are those who might be in what we call a hyperactive state, or sort of like hyperventilative state or a panic state. This works really well for them. Or people who are not, aren't well, let's just do this. Okay, so yes, it is called the wet noodle. Somebody asked me, like, can't we call it something else? I'm like, no, we're not calling it anything else. This is what it's called in the therapy world. But the truth is, it's kind of humorous, and when you work with your students on doing it, especially if you work with students in special education or 504 or support services and you can pull them out, this is a great exercise to do with them. But it's also fun, and my high schoolers love it, okay? So how I explain this to them is, if you think of spaghetti, spaghetti is very hard and rigid. And if I hit spaghetti when it's dry, the impact will break it, okay? But if I have wet spaghetti or a wet noodle and I hit it, I will have impact. It will fall to the ground. It will stick. It will be malleable to whatever the surface it hits. That's why you might hear stories as adults, not that this is for the kid part, but you might hear stories of adults that fell asleep and were in a car crash and didn't sustain many, if any, injuries. It's because their system was relaxed. Their system was relaxed and wasn't anticipating any triggers, okay? So what happens, and you can close your eyes for this part if you would like, but I would like you to kind of scan your body. Just take a mental inventory as you scan your body from the top of your head down to the toes and your feet to see if there's any areas that are tight or tense or that you're holding on to some extra stuff, okay? I want you to notice it could be your shoulders, it could be your back, some people your calves, your legs. That's where you're storing your stress, okay? So when we do the wet noodle, we are literally going to take a deep breath, and I'm going to count backwards, and you're intentionally going to imagine that tightness sort of like it's holding on to sort of like a slime, and you're going to let go of that slime and release it, and it's going to flow down through your body and out through your toes and onto the floor because you don't need it anymore. You're not stressed out, okay? So if you feel like closing your eyes, you can, so you don't think your colleagues see you. I'm not going to judge anybody. We're all doing this together. It's definitely easier to do sitting in a chair, but you can do it standing up just as easily, okay? So deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth, and I'm going to count down, and we're just going to relax. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Deep breath in and out again. And now you can notice where that tension was before is at the same number that it was before. Now some of you are like, listen, I'm tense and tight all the time. That did nothing for me. That's okay, we have something for you too. So the truth is that just intentionally doing that will relax your system enough. Now, what some of you are going to do is this amazing thing called yawning. And it's okay, I know you're not tired. Actually, what's happening in your brain is your brain has told your body, oh, there's no bears and we're safe now. And it's turning back on your prefrontal cortex. When an individual is yawning, it is because they've relaxed enough that their prefrontal cortex is engaging. Or it's also the fact that their brain has been in sleep mode and relaxed mode long enough, and now they have to participate in something like you sat and watched PD all day, and then you drive home and you're like having all these conversations and you can't figure out why you're yawning. You're not tired, your brain's just engaging your computer. You're trying to be an active participant, so it's a good sign. All right, some people, I tend to find that girls prefer this particular one more than guys do. Doesn't mean they can't do it, they just prefer it better. It is the butterfly hug. And the reason that we do this one is because when trauma or threat activates in us, sometimes our own physical body doesn't even feel like a safe container anymore, okay? Especially your individuals that struggle with sensory processing disorder or individuals that are diagnosed with autism may struggle with this. Butterfly hug, super simple. We lock our thumbs together. Y'all can do it with me. I won't tell anybody you did it, okay? And you just are kind of just tapping here, fluttering here, something like that. Now, the alternative is, if you have some gentlemen that don't want to do the butterfly hug, even though I won't tell anybody that, is you could still use their hands and they can tap lightly on the tops of their legs. It's just another way for your body to kind of connect with itself, okay? Then we have the magic mustache. This one is one that usually the gentlemen prefer over the ladies, but all can do it. And that is that you have a nerve ending right here between your nose and your upper lip. Okay, so we're gonna take our magic mustache, and we're gonna press in and up, okay, for a count of 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, release. Now, some of you, it may feel tingly right now, and that's okay. It's the blood rushing back to that area. But the truth is that is the tip of a nerve that connects the whole way down through your body and can release the tension that you feel in that system. So this works even if you have a class that's super hyped up after you had this great activity, or they came in from recess and there's just all a buzz. Hey, everybody, let's do a magic mustache. Little fun activity, calms them down, resets the system, re-engage. Okay. The chair pull-up, I am not going to demonstrate, but I'll talk you through what it looks like. You guys have these great chairs to do it with. But a chair pull-up is kind of the opposite of what we did with the wet noodle, but the same effect. It's because in this particular one and the next one, the system is constantly activated to a point where it can't release. So it's almost like that pressure on a spring. You push hard to release it kind of thought process. So in this one, you grab the sides of your chair with your arms, and you are going to pull up from your arms, but push your torso down. So you're creating tension in your arms, okay? If you're on the end, it's much easier to do than sitting in the middle. But you pull up and push down at the same time, creating that tension in your body, and just count down until you release, okay? That will use up a lot of your energy. So if you don't have much left, you're gonna be really exhausted afterwards. Okay, activated muscle relaxation, we are gonna do this one. Now here's what I'll tell you about this one also. I firmly believe that what I've seen in the studies I've worked with in trauma is that anytime we allow, especially students who are activated with anger and aggression, to use techniques that are like, yeah, I just wanna go like punch something or go to these smash rooms and get my anger out and get my energy out, that is actually counterproductive to releasing the anger and the aggression. It actually activates that system even more. So the goal is not to activate it more, but to burn it up faster. And activated muscle relaxation is a great way to do that. Now, another form of this is progressive, and we don't have time for that today. But with activated muscle relaxation, and y'all can do it, and you can close your eyes too if you don't want your colleagues to see you, is you are going to tense every single muscle group in your body, including your face. And we're gonna hold it for a count of 10. Okay, hold it as tight as you can, and I'll do it from the stage. Curl your toes in your shoes. Hold them as tight as you can. Here we go. On your mark, get set. Tense for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, release. Deep breath. Some of you are like, I am exhausted. That's because no bears were chasing you, and then you used up all the extra you had anyways. But the thing is for those individuals that are constantly like stressed out, extra tight all the time, wound up tight, having them practice this. For kids that have a lot of extra energy, they're super activated. If you sat through my personality styles, the sapphires, the ones that are always on the go, that no matter where you sit them, they'll find somebody to talk to. This is a great exercise for them because they're burning up energy. They're burning up the extra adrenaline or cortisol in their system that gives them the capacity to reactivate their prefrontal cortex and sit and focus. Okay, oh, there's a meter picture, woo-hoo. Okay, so here's the number one excuse I get from people all the time. It's a sad excuse. Do you know what the word excuse stands for? A well-planned lie. So I'm giving you information to take away your excuse today. The excuse I get is, I'm not a therapist, I can't do this. Well, here's the truth, you can, because you don't have to be a therapist to listen to somebody talk. And oftentimes they just want to share information with you. And here's the 3 key questions that you can ask them. This doesn't require you to be active in participation with them. The first question is, what happened? You can use this with anyone at any time. The goal is for them to communicate key facts and timeline to you, okay? The second thing is, how did you feel or how are you feeling? It helps them put boundaries on vague things. Remember, you're just listening. You're not listening to answer, you're listening to listen. And then the third question is, what was the hardest part for you, or what is the hardest part for you? It helps you understand their perception of what they just experienced. And they can share all that, and you can walk away, and it could be the end of the discussion. Now, some of you I know cannot do that. You feel super compelled to be the problem solver. So the bonus question for you all would be, would you like help in solving that problem? And if so, what does it look like? If you absolutely feel like you cannot close your mouth and just listen to them after the 3 questions, you can ask them the bonus one, okay? Because the truth is, they may not want your help in solving the problem. They may just want to express it to you. And having the opportunity to release it out of their mouths gives their brain permission to move forward because it's no longer taking up story space. Okay. And then I apologize because this is not the ending that I planned on having, so I apologize to you. I will share the correct ending, but this is really important to reframe your thinking, and the correct ending that I thought I might have is really the fact that there are what I call rats and cats. And rats and cats are ready available thoughts. Rats are readily available thoughts. And that is so much of what comes up in anxiety and what, actually I found it, so I'm going to transition, see if this will slide over and we can use it this way. I apologize. That's what happens when you're like too many places at too many times. So reframing your thinking is rats and cats, and this is a great communicative tool especially for those of you that are in support services or administration or all the support roles where they come dump on you all the time about information, is they can't reframe thinking or get back on track until they've relaxed their body anyways, okay? So all of you have the techniques to help them relax and reset. But if they want to engage with you after that, having them write down what are the rat thoughts. We don't like rats to keep them with us all the time. They're just not great. So we're going to write them down, and then we're going to talk about what are the cats, the corrective action thoughts, the things or the alternative thoughts. And it's kind of their fears versus what the truth and facts are, okay? So that's just a great way to approach it. And then sometimes I ask them, what are the opinions of other people? Do you really need to keep them? Because their friends will offer them a lot of opinions. It doesn't mean it's their truth. That's a great question. Also, worry time. And you're like, seriously? But this is what I tell people about worry time. And I have 3 minutes left, so if you have a question, I will take them in the next 3 minutes so you can line up at the microphones. But as I explain this, worry time is having them, if they have extreme anxiety or worry, having them carry a little notebook around and write those questions down, and then having them designate a specific time where they're going to look at that notebook, maybe 4 o'clock every day. Because the truth is very rarely do people pull out their notebook and look at it at 4 o'clock, because it seems kind of silly to actually worry about something at 4 o'clock today. But it gives their brain a chance to write something down to get out of it. And then identity list is one of the biggest things I can say, because if we don't have statements to identify the truth of who we are and what that looks like, character virtues, or our personality traits or things like that, we have no sense of place of where to return to. Fear has become rampant, and we've let it go anywhere with us. We've let any thought lead us. And feelings are just a signal that something is off internally. The behavior is the communication that it's off, okay? The feeling is the notification to us internally. Something is wrong, my heart is hurting. But if we don't have a sense of truth or identity to return ourselves to, we will wander aimlessly, giving every thought and feeling the same value. So I always encourage people to have a list of 5 or 10 things. And when they're starting to feel anxious, after they've calmed their body, I want them to replace what's in there, all of those thoughts, with the truth of who they are. Because that's the sense of what they can return to. So, nobody came to the microphone. Does anybody have any questions? I appreciate your time today. Thank you for participating with me. I do come around and travel to some schools. El Paso, I just haven't made it out there yet, but hopefully one day I will make it out there. So I appreciate all of your attendance, and I'm always available to work with schools on individual basis, answer any questions. Hopefully you have something you can take away from for this year. Just remember, behavior is communication, and there could be a bear, and it could be loud. So, thank you for your time, and have a great day.